All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Dedicated Show. My name is Kate Stashny. I'll be your host for today's show, and let's go ahead and get things started. So, quick update: this is the final show of 2022. We had a show a couple of weeks ago that was supposed to be the final, but then I could not help myself. We have this really great panel that I'm going to introduce in a second, and the topic is really important. We're going to talk about the new modern data stack. Before we get into the topic and before I bring up our speakers, I do want to hear from our audience. Are you traveling this holiday, or are you planning to stay home? Just let us know in the comments. And a quick reminder for those who might be new or returning to the show and have forgotten, this is a very interactive live show. If you're here live, please go ahead and comment, introduce yourself, talk to us, talk to each other, ask us questions, leave comments on what we're talking about. We want this to be a nice group discussion. It will be the three of us sort of live chatting here, but we will definitely engage as much as possible with the audience that joins us. Now, as I mentioned, today we're talking about the new modern data stack. And with me here today, I'm going to bring up in just a second Vinay Samuel, who is the founder and CEO of Zetaris, as well as Kent Graziano. He is known as the Data Warrior, and he's the Chief Technical Advisor at Zetaris. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring up our guest speakers, and we'll leave the question up on screen so folks can answer. Hello, Vinay. Hello, Kent. Welcome to the Dedicated Show.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
Excellent. Great to have you here. Our audience is slowly but surely answering the questions, and we'll get to their answers in just a bit. I think a good place for us to start is introductions. Now, I think, Vinay, let's get started with you. Just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about Zetaris.
Great. Hi, everyone. And again, thanks a lot for the opportunity, Kate, to be on the show. So myself, I've been in data management, data engineering and analytics for about 25 years now, starting at Teradata, and I've went through quite a few different data startups that actually centralized data and brought data together for data warehousing and data lakes. What Zetaris does is actually the total opposite. What we do is we have a thing called a networked data platform from Zetaris. And what it does, it enables you to join data and analyze it regardless of where it's stored or where it lives across your network. So we provide an automated data engineering and data virtualization platform to make it super easy to create that single point of access for all your enterprise data and across the cloud.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Great to have you here. And the Data Warrior, I'd love to hear a little bit about you.
Hey. Hi, Kate. Good to see you this morning. I guess it's morning for me. Very early morning for Vinay. So Kent Graziano, I am... I have my own little consultancy now called Data Warrior LLC. I've actually been in the data space for over 4 decades now. And actually a year ago, almost to the day, I tried to retire. I was the chief technical evangelist at Snowflake and put out a post on LinkedIn saying I was retiring. And as you can tell, I haven't. I say I'm semi-retired now. But I've been doing, data stuff for a very long time, and my specialty was data architecture and data modeling. And in the mid 90s, that morphed into data warehousing. I got to meet Bill Inman and Claudia Imhoff and work with them, and then Dan Lindstedt and the Data Vault world, and just got really heavy into all of that. And that eventually led me to Snowflake and the great product they put together. And like I said, I tried to retire. So it was time to take a break. But then, people like Vinay kept, knocking on my door and saying, "Come on, man, we need some help. Can you help us a little bit?" So I'm still here doing fun things like this show.
Great.
With a title like Data Warrior, we couldn't let you leave the battlefield, mate.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, warriors don't retire, Ken. So.
That's right.
Oh my God, I love it. Well, great to have you both here on the final show. So for the audience, the question we asked was, are you staying home or traveling for the holidays? Before we get to the comments, Vinay, are you staying home or are you traveling?
What am I doing? I'm actually staying home. So
Okay.
lots of little projects on the house and catching up with family and all of that. I'm actually based in Palo Alto in San Francisco, but my family is in Melbourne, Australia. So kind of visiting at the moment back home.
Fun fact, Vinay's time zone means it's 3 o'clock in the morning now. So
Loving it.
that's dedication. Yes. And Kent, you mentioned you're traveling, right? So you're
Yeah, I'm doing both basically. So I'm traveling to visit my dad and my brothers and their families. Taking my son to visit them. We're going to do Christmas Eve with them, and then hop on a plane Christmas morning and fly back here to Texas, and then have our at home Texas Christmas and New Year's here in Texas.
okay. Awesome. And I'll be home. I'm just home. That's it. Everyone's coming to my house. So that's just checking into to the comments. So we've got George is staying, Arun is staying, some private users traveling, staying home. Someone from Texas is here. Let's see, staying. I think most people are staying where they are, which is interesting to see. I guess nobody wants to deal with the airplanes, right, Kent? Like we were discussing.
I don't have any problem with it. I don't know what people's problems are. I'm just as happy to have all those people staying home. Then
Yeah.
there's more room on the plane for me. So the airports aren't quite as crowded. Christmas Day is not a bad day to travel. I did the same thing last year. I've traveled on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, multiple times over the last bunch of decades, and those are actually pretty good days to travel. And people in the airports are actually friendly and happy, and
Oh, nice.
you just be nice to everyone that works there, realizing that they're working on Christmas Day, and
Right.
make sure you
Right.
say Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yes, of course, and happy holidays because
Yep.
that's the way to say, as if there are that many more holidays. But anyways, let's keep going. So we're here to talk about not the modern data stack, but the new modern data stack. And as we get into that topic, I think it's also important to remind the audience that you can ask us questions. So we're going to have this discussion, and we have questions prepared for our two guest speakers, but definitely jump in with questions as those come up. Now, let's set the stage. What does that really mean? What is the new modern data stack?
Yeah, let me have a crack at it. So the reason why we're using that term is we kind of like we've reached a point in, I guess, analytical maturity where customers are recognizing that the value of bringing data together is the big thing, right? Data in different parts of your business, and most organizations we speak to, they actually have they don't have a single view of all their data in one place. They've got data in the cloud, data in their network, data in their data center, across their partner network, and the traditional model for trying to create an analytical view, bringing it all together using some sort of ETL or ELT process, seems to be what the industry has been chasing for a long time, but hasn't had a lot of success. It's been difficult to do. It's been error prone, data quality issues, and just about every customer is looking at what is the new way of doing it. And I think where we're landing, the new way is actually saying you need to harmonize all the other data integration styles. You don't just do ETL, ELT. You harmonize things like messaging with CDC, with data virtualization, and so on and so forth, to come up with the right model for your use case and the right model for where your data is, right? Awesome companies like Snowflake hold lots of data for the bank, but the bank will still have other data somewhere else that needs to be harmonized with that data in Snowflake. So this idea of the new modern data stack, really, what we're trying to do is to remind people that it's not about just moving data all the time. It's about creating the right model, and sometimes you may not move the data at all. You may join it in real time. That's the appropriate model.
Right. And Vinay, you mentioned Snowflake. I know we have someone here who's very familiar with Snowflake. Kent, I'd love to hear from you. You've seen it all in that role, and now you're a technical advisor at Zetaris. So I'd love to hear sort of what experience you're bringing from Snowflake. What have you seen, and maybe you can add a little bit more to the concept of that right model that Vinay was talking about.
Yeah, and it's over the last I was at Snowflake for 6 years, so the last 7-8 years really, things changed as the amount of data grew and grew and grew and went way beyond even what people thought of as big data, and we got more and more sources. And one of the things we saw is what Vinay just mentioned, is this challenge of, well, there was a desire to move the main data estate into something like Snowflake and into the cloud, and have a single source of truth, as it were, which we always used to refer to in the early days of data warehousing. The reality was there was still a lot of data that it wasn't going to be necessarily economical to move it into Snowflake. And as everyone who knows Snowflake is aware, over time, eventually Snowflake added this concept of external tables. So even in Snowflake, we had customers who said, yeah, we've got way too much out here in our Hadoop data lake, or our cloud data lake in S3 or Azure Blob Storage, that we don't know that we want to move it all into Snowflake right away. Is there a way we can get a look at that data without moving it into Snowflake, without doing the ELT or ETL, as Vinay was mentioning? And then even recently, Snowflake's added the ability to attach to Avalanche. I think that's what it was called. Yeah. There's a couple other things. Yeah. So this has been a growing trend. And in the data science space, I see this a lot where people really want to get a look at the data. They need to analyze the data, do some discovery on the data. Even if they want to move it into Snowflake, there's no sense in moving data into Snowflake that's not of any value. So this idea of a hybrid architecture is really what we're talking about, has been growing over the last 5 years of people. The need is there. And I think as we get into bigger and bigger companies, the cloud has kind of become a de facto thing, right? People are moving their data into the cloud in order to be competitive, get the scale and all of that. But again, that takes time, right? It's not like snap your fingers and 50 petabytes of data is magically in the cloud. That takes time, and any rational architect is going to ask the question of the business: do we really need all of that data? How are we going to use that data? What's the business problem we're going to solve with that data before we spend all this money moving it around? And Zetaris's platform is actually opened up that possibility even more to be able to start doing that access. The other big trend was this demand for a unified semantic layer. Absolutely. And that's something that I've been into for a couple of decades now. And that's what we were trying to do with data warehousing, right? And whether you want to call it a data warehouse, a data lake house, whatever you want to call it, but to have one place where the business can go and see their data. We're doing it with catalogs now and all sorts of things. But in the end, the requirement was a unified semantic layer. And by that, they want a way to look at the data that makes sense to the business people. They don't care about the table names and column names in the source system or in the data warehouse or in the data lake. They need something that, business analysts can look at and go, okay, I understand what that data is. I know what that data is. And so being able to provide that, a single place where people can go and point whatever tools they want. This was a challenge I've seen with a lot of Snowflake customers. You may have 15 different BI tools. And as we get into the data mesh world, each data domain may have a different tool that they're comfortable with.
Right.
You don't want them all creating connections to the data independently, because that's another great way to end up with data silos and disparate results. But if you can give them a common place where everybody connects, and so you make one change, we add some new data in, everybody who's allowed to see it, we'll say it's got to be governed still, is allowed to see it, can see it without having to redo, their Tableau connection, their business objects connection, their Power BI connection, their Excel ODBC connection, and build new semantics around it that they can just point to this one place and say, oh, okay, there's some new data, and everybody's getting the same definition. So that's those two things have been growing. That need for a hybrid architecture that gets access to all this data and do it in a way that it has a unified semantic interface.
And that's what we're seeing, Kate, from our customers when we show them the network data platform. The things that really light them up is that ability to cross query and query anything in different places and bring them together in real time. But the unified semantic layer within Zetaris, it enables them to do everything Ken said. And also, it enables you to rethink the way you handle transformation. This idea of transforming a data object once in a single place and that being your single source of transformation or calculation, it really simplifies the data engineering effort. It also gives us opportunities to automate it. So I can't agree more with Kent that unified semantic layer, that single description of the wider decentralized data landscape is critical if you're going to bring efficiencies to your data engineering, your transformation capability, and all that effort that normally goes into the data sources or the data warehouses. That effort can be done once rather than repeated many, many times over and over again. So that ability to handle and automate data engineering, we're getting a lot of positive feedback. We get customers who say, "Gee, I thought this was going to take us, a month's worth of work. We've managed to do this within a day," right? And that's because of the automation, because of the single place where you describe everything and be able to do it once, not many times. I think the world is changing towards new models, recognizing that a decentralized landscape is actually, I'm not going to say is the thing that's prevailing. It's the thing that was always the case. Even when 30 years ago I was selling single version of the truth enterprise data warehouse from Teradata. But one day I realized Teradata never had one single version of the truth enterprise data warehouse, right? Their customers had Oracle and DB2 and everything. So I think finally the industry is recognizing that actually data is created everywhere across our landscape. We've got this problem and we need a new way to think through it.
I love this. It seems like a faraway dream for me. So I do want to get more into the details of how does this actually work? How is it implemented? Because this brings me back probably 5-6 years when I was working at a company and we were dealing with data and we had not 15 BI tools, but close to 15 different tools, Tableau, Power BI, whatever else you can think of. And we had databases. And not only did we create separate connections for each of those BI tools, a lot of times we've exported data from the databases, made changes to the spreadsheets, then connected the BI tools. Oh, look at Kent. So my question, and
no lineage at all, no auditability.
no documentation anywhere. Nobody knows. Why is this number not the same? Oh yeah, we had to multiply it by 0.001 to make it work. Why? We don't know. We just did it to make it that.
Somebody said we had to do that. Ooh,
someone 10
they
years
don't
ago
work here anymore.
Of course not, for obvious reasons, right? But that is the last I've seen that environment. So are we now in a place where people are just behaving differently and they're aware that we need this single source, we need this unified semantic layer, or are they still sort of behaving in their silos, doing whatever they need to do quickly because that's the only way they know how? Or are you seeing more patience where they're like, let's unify all the data, we'll have one connection for all the BI tools? And
that depends. The classic consultant answer, right? This is where we start talking about data literacy and data culture. So it really does depend on the organization on how they view data and how they are they viewing data as an asset, and are they really building a data culture? Are they the idea of being data driven? We've been talking about that for how long, Vinay? Probably 30 years at least.
Long time,
Is there a concerted effort at the highest levels of the organization to build a data culture? because they are seeing value for being data driven. And that's the thing that's going to change the behavior, right? Yes, there's going to be people out there that, they don't want to wait for IT. They don't want to wait for whoever, and they're going to pull the data and they're going to mess with it to get something that they think has to be done now.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, then they feed that data to somebody else. I worked one place one time where they hadn't documented anything, and I spent 3 months documenting the data flows and the multiple data warehouses and data marts. And at one point discovered that the same data was being fed into a single place through 3 different paths. And nobody knew that.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So not only and the ETL at the time, they were transforming the data, and they were transforming the differently depending on which path it took. And so, of course, none of it they were able to sync it up, but nobody had documented it. So changing that kind of behavior, though, has to be a changing culture in the organization. And that's regardless of whether you're doing data lakes, data lake houses, data warehouses, or data mesh.
Wow.
Right? You have to have that, I'll say, internal agreement on this is how we're going to behave. This is how we value data. This is how we're going to run our organization. And instead of saying, well, no, you can't do that, you say, here's how we want you to do that. How do we eliminate those data silos and those different transformations? And is it through a tool like Zetaris? And, how do we do that so that we can all get to this common vision, at least, of what we want to do with the data and how we're going to access the data, and build that trust in the data? They said we talk a lot about different use cases for this type of technology. And one of them is the migration use case that I'm a big fan of. Let's get access to the data early, get the business looking at the data, validating the data, that it is the quality data they need to make good business decisions on. We view it through this common semantic layer.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the first step into migrating to something like Snowflake and saying, okay, here's a data set. We've now looked at it. We're happy with it. But yeah, we want to incorporate it into a data domain in our data mesh on Snowflake. And so it becomes a stepping stone. But one of the beauties and the thing I love about this paradigm is that if you've built this common semantic layer, the business and the tools that are accessing it don't have to care where the data actually lives. Right. So we can start off with it, maybe it's in an Oracle database that's at a data center that's going to get decommissioned later this year. Right. Well, we can still hook it up and people can start using that data and validating. Yeah, we need to keep that data. We don't want to lose that data. And this is the data we're using. This is the data we're not using. So let's move. Now that we've validated and we've built the semantic model, then we'll move this, we'll migrate it over to Snowflake.
Yeah. And
then decommission the Oracle. But the people who are accessing it, doesn't matter to them, right? Because they're seeing it through this common semantic layer. So they don't have to change their connections. They don't have to do anything. Just, the data's moved under the covers. Hey, maybe it'll perform better when they move it.
Maybe.
There's a good chance that might happen. But it really gives us a lot of other options that before we didn't think of. And I think that's one of the critiques that Zhamak has of the data warehouse, data lake world, is that these monolithic projects that have IT in the middle bottlenecking everything. It's like, this is one way to get around it, is like, how do you get people to not do data silos and do their own thing? Well, is you have to give them an environment where they get access to the data they want in a timely manner, so they're not feeling like they're boxed into a corner and they have no choice but to go off the rails and do something that might not be within company policy.
Right. And I appreciate you sharing all that, especially in the beginning, Kent. I think you gave me an idea to put together like data scary stories or horror stories. And I'm sure you have plenty of those. Before we dive deeper into the topic, we have someone asking to sort of set the stage a little bit more, unified semantic layer and being decentralized. If you can elaborate on these concepts so folks can get a better understanding of what that means.
Sure. Let me dive into that a little bit. So, what we do is we enable our customers to decide where the data gets stored or whether they need to move the data at all. Okay, and so the idea is that you connect to your data sources across your data landscape, and you create a raw source view of that data. And we've got within our network data platform, we've got this ability to do that without any code. You can point and click and connect to different sources, and all of a sudden you see all of the different schemas and metadata from each source. But that's the raw source. And as most of you would know, the metadata from different data sources across your business and across the cloud, the same entities in your business would be described differently across that metadata. So creating that unified semantic layer is the idea that you create a single logical view of all of the entities in your business, and you describe them with the same words, the same business rules, and you apply known and well-documented transformations to use it. And so within Zetaris, we've got this capability to automate the creation of that semantic view, that business view, and that unified description of different entities. A simple example for people who haven't seen data modeling before or haven't worked in the data space is just that customer may be described differently in the same bank. In one database, customer could be called member. Another database customer could be called associate, believe it or not. Depending on how the source or the application that the data came from described customer, you might have up to 15, 20, 30 different names for the same thing. So unified semantic layer reconciles that and gives it one name, one description, one set of business rules.
Yeah, and I want to drill in on that a little bit because Vinay said, my magic words there, data model and data modeling. We're back again to the importance of data modeling and the data modeling discipline. But what we're talking about here, it's not designing tables and columns in a database. We're a couple levels higher than that. When I started in the data space in the late 80s, it was called entity relationship modeling. And that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about using common business terms as agreed upon within the organization to describe the data. As Vinay's example, it's, customer might be called member in one database, it might be customer in another. You might have _name or customer last name.
So many ways.
and we've got to agree on these things. So even with the best platforms in the world, if you can't agree on that, then you can't actually be effective as a data-driven company. And we're really, that idea of a semantic model, we've done this in the data vault world, in the data vault modeling technique. And what I ended up trying to, in order to describe it to people, I call it's a source system agnostic model. Right. So we're not going to go reverse engineer the names out of all these source systems. Now, maybe some of them, that will be the basis, but that's the basis for the discussion with the businesses. Do you realize that you've got these 15 systems and the way you identify customers in those 15 systems is distinctly different? So How are we going to harmonize those together? What is the agreed upon terminology and taxonomy? And that's what goes into this common semantic model that we're talking about. In order to do that, under the covers, it's all these different things. And really, that's the hard work that we've always had to do in data warehousing to do ETL or ELT. It's the T part, is how do we take these things that are the same but look different and bring them together in a rational way that makes it useful to the business, and it's high quality and it's governed, and everybody agrees that this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it.
And to give you a sense of the importance of it, we had one of our bank customers who I won't name. When we applied our reference model, so Zetaris comes with a set of industry reference models, which we automate the development of the unified semantic layer using that reference model. When we applied the reference model and created a single view of their data across the different lines of business and different brands that they had, one of the things they found out was they were actually calculating loan to value ratio differently 4 times over,
What?
right? And so you could go and be declined at one of their branches, walk
Oh,
across the road and be accepted, because the data was described differently, the calculations were applied differently, and therefore the outcome was differently. So it's not just the naming standards, it's the business rules, it's the calculations and things like that. So it's super important to get it right.
yeah.
And we've done a lot of work within our data virtualization layer and our model to bring that capability in.
So I think at this point we all can agree it is extremely important to get the business rules correct, the naming, the calculations. My question is, how do we actually do it? So I know companies are very special and departments have preferences and leaders, right? They're all comes back to people. And one leader might prefer clients over customers and the other one wants members.
Yeah,
Who
I
does
think, look,
does Zetaris say I pick you, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or how does it work?
what we offer is a way to try and resolve that debate by providing a reference model that's baked into our platform. So,
Right.
reference model, a platform, an environment by which people can actually see the raw data, see the raw source, and be able to collaborate on the issue. That
Mhm.
goes a long way towards bringing efficiency to the problem. But at the end of the day, you're talking about how someone is describing their business, and
Yes.
and their understanding of the business rules and the IP within that business. And so you have to have good consultants to work with the business to help them solve that as well. But definitely with our network data platform, we bring some IP and some automation and an environment by which one can actually sort that problem through.
Mm-hmm. Got it. We have
The
lots of.
answer, the
Yeah,
other
go
part of
ahead.
the answer is it's not easy. There
No.
is no
That's
easy answer. People have been wanting the magic button. They keep thinking AI is going to do it, and AI can look across all those systems and say, of the 15 systems you've got, the most common name for this element
Yeah.
is
Hmm.
customer. But still, then you have to decide, do we want to use that? Is that really just because it's the most common across all the systems, does that mean it's right? Probably not, because some of those systems are 20 years old and the
Right.
business has changed. And so we're never going to get this magic button that's going to suddenly build your what we used to call an enterprise data model, because that's basically what we're talking about, that everybody agrees on, because people are people and
Yeah.
they're going to disagree. And that's why we still end up having to do things like data governance and have data stewards. The trick, really, in my mind, is to do it a little at a time. Is the thing we have to eliminate is the old days of we're going to do the entire enterprise data model before we do
Absolutely.
anything else. And again, with the modern tools and with automation and taking an agile approach, right?
Yeah.
And doing things like minimum viable products and doing prioritized backlogs, we can look at this and say, well, where do we want to start?
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest problem we have that if we could solve that in a couple of weeks, that we'd all be better off and help set the stage for what we're going to do. And that's really you have to get people bought into the culture, into this data culture, by building success, right? And showing them that it can work. And there's a lot of trial and error, and depending on the maturity of the data governance within an organization, it could be easy or it could be really hard, and you may have to bring in some outside experts to coach the team. Saw that a lot when we first started doing agile in the data warehousing space, is we had to bring in outside experts that could coach the team, bring them along and show them, okay, yeah, you could do that, but if you do that, this is what's going to happen, and things like that. It's not easy. I ran a master data project for a large tech organization about 15 years ago, and we met once a month with 20 representatives from the various departments to work out a master data model and do these sorts of debates over what are we going to call these things, and are they really the same? And in many cases, we found out they really weren't the same, and they should have distinct names. And it took us, I think it was about 9 months, little by little, building out that model. And in the end, it had 500 entities.
Wow.
And that was just for one part of the business. But in the end, everybody agreed this was a good description of the business. This was an accurate representation of the relationships between the data in the business. And so then they could go from there in building out, at the time it was BI, right? Back in the day, it was just their BI is like, how are we going to do that? But it took a couple of months to get the buy-in from the business that this was the process and that there was value in the process. Today, we hope we can accelerate it, that it's not a couple of months, it's more like a couple of weeks. As Vinay said, that you can get some quick wins and show people the value of doing this, of taking this approach. So that they're willing then to really, put all their cards on the table, as it were, and have these conversations.
Let me add that with data virtualization and the way our platform works, making that mistake on the model isn't as drastic as it used to be, right? You can just change the virtual view and change the business view of it by doing it virtually rather than physically having to change a database. So a lot of efficiencies have come since we were doing it manually back in the day.
Yeah, and I think that's been part of the beauty and the power of the cloud, is to allow us to do that. I've been doing basically virtual data marts for over a decade, even before Snowflake came on the scene, for that very reason, right? Is if we get the business access to the data and they look at it and go, oh, no, that's not right. That transformation is wrong. Whatever it was a lot easier for us to fix it by modifying the view, as it were, rather than having to modify ETL code and run through a whole bunch of regression tests and make sure we didn't break anything. And as we've got the power of the cloud and the speed, and then you add on top of it a new modern technology like Zetaris has built, it makes it a lot quicker to do. And they said you can, we used to say in Agile, fail fast, right?
Yeah.
Get the data out there, show it to the business, have them tell us what's wrong with it, and then fix it and fix the view. And once people start to see the data, then you can have this interaction, right? This interaction with the business as to what's the real meaning of the data, and is that the data? And as we're trying out through this virtualization approach, okay, we're pulling data from this source, and they go, well, now that we see the data, that's not really the source we want to use. Right. Okay, well, we didn't spend 6 months building ETL and database tables and migrating it all to Snowflake to have them then tell us, oops,
that's the wrong
that
data.
wasn't what we really wanted. Can we go look at this other source? So by taking this hybrid approach, it opens up those opportunities to not incur as much technical debt, and to not incur as much cost before we find out that we've actually gone down the wrong road.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's all about fail fast as long as you can fix faster.
Right.
We have several questions from the audience. I'm going to try to take as many as we can here. I'll start with Christine, and she's asking, does this movement towards standardizing data on one platform, is it part of a trend in developing data and AI strategy to guide business leaders in monetizing value in their organization's data stream?
Wow. I think the answer is yes. To that, I mean, there's a lot of parts to that question.
There is.
So the movement towards standardizing data on one platform, that's 40 years old, right? That's been going on for a long time. What I saw in the last 5-6 years at least at Snowflake is, yes, the idea of machine learning, data science, AI is definitely driving the demand for the data, right? And how you, where you access it and how you access it it becomes just the technical question of what's the most efficient way of doing it. The standardization, though, is very important, because you're building business processes off of these, and you're basically potentially going to be making business decisions. But you have to have, good quality data to feed into these machine learning algorithms if you're going to run AI off of it, right?
Right.
And that's been a huge driver for making sure the data is good, and part of good sometimes means standardized, right? That it meets some standard definition, and it might not just be the name of the object, but the quality of the data that you're getting from the various sources, the accuracy of the source itself, even the data type and size, right? Is how long is customer name?
Right.
Is it alpha? Is it numeric?
Yeah.
Should it be parsed out into multiple parts? All of that is part of that standardization, right? That you've got to have that, and you've got to have agreement on that. If people are going to build algorithms to make inferences from that data, we've got to have some agreement on that. So I think that is part of the drive towards all of this, is the need to have access to more data, to more high quality data that we trust.
Right.
Because it still applies, whether you're talking about programming or AI or machine learning. It's garbage in, garbage out. And we've got to avoid that, especially if we're going to run our businesses on it.
Goodness in, goodness out, Kent.
Yes.
Okay. Can I just add to that? What I've seen over the last 5 years is a lot of sub-trends that are pushing towards, much faster, better access to data. Things like the citizen data scientist, the business person who wants to get technical and get closer to the data. Things like regulatory changes and privacy changes in terms of governance and data quality. It's no longer acceptable to just say, oh yeah, we've got a data quality problem. Believe it or not, 10, 15 years ago, people were presenting at conferences saying, we're now at 85% data quality. Isn't that great? I'm sure Kent remembers, right? And everyone would clap. Wow, that's amazing. Trouble is the other 15% was corrupting the rest of the data, right? Whereas now we've reached a level of maturity in the industry and business people, their level of understanding of data, where people they no longer tolerate not having the data. They want the data now. The 3-month project cycles are being challenged. The latency in the answers or the answer set, meaning the data not being real time, is being challenged. So there's a lot of trends that are pushing towards this idea of a decentralized hybrid. I like the word hybrid that Kent's using. Hybrid architecture, where you have your big processing engines like Snowflake, for instance, that's carrying the big aircraft carrier of data, but also having the satellites of data, which is more real time, to bring in contextual aspects to the analytics. So I'm seeing a lot of trends towards faster, less tolerance in terms of data quality. So yeah, I think we're heading towards a new type of platform, which is this hybrid decentralized platform.
Okay, I love it. All right, next question. This will be an easier one. Ramdas is asking, is Zetaris on-prem or cloud?
Yes.
So they said that was an easy one. There we go.
Yeah, we do both. So we've got various models. You can actually go to the cloud, or say you can go to Azure and actually spin up a Zetaris system within your private Azure if you wanted to, you can download it and put it on some Linux servers, a Linux cluster, or you can use our SaaS. We're trying to make it really easy to use. In fact, one of the offers at the end of this, Kate, I'm going to jump in and do a little ad in the middle of this.
Oh, go for it.
Is please trial Zetaris. If you want a data engineering automation platform that's point and click, no code, and it does all these things we're talking about, you can actually trial it for a month for free. And so please come to our website, and maybe we'll publish a link where people can inquire about the trial. We've got an open public facing knowledge base and free certification as well. So we're trying to make it really accessible, the technology, and we do want the community to engage so we can get some more feedback to continue to improve it.
Okay, Zetaris.com, and I'll share the link in the chat for that free trial. So the next question we've had here is from a LinkedIn user, so we don't know the name, but the semantic layer sounds great in principle, but how do you deal with multiple users querying data from different sources that you would typically summarize in the data warehouse in order to improve query response times?
Yeah. So let me. I'm trying to digest the question first.
Yeah,
So
I'll leave it up on screen for you.
yeah, please. So how do you deal with multiple users? So basically, all of this, in my mind, points to one of the biggest bit of engineering that took us 5 years to do. So to do a decentralized data platform or hybrid model that can run a query that touches Snowflake and at the same time is blending in data from the data center. Perhaps there's Teradata sitting in the data center. You're connecting a table in Teradata to tables in Snowflake to potentially some Parquet files in AWS, all in real time to solve a query that normally you would do in a data warehouse. To do that, it takes a bit of IP called a heterogeneous query optimizer or analytical ready query optimizer. It took us 5 years to build that. It's processing IP. It's applying thinking around rule-based, cost-based, AI and heuristics-based query optimization. It's the heart of what we do, and so it's a great question. But it gave me the opportunity to say that this stuff isn't easy to build, and therefore you need experts to build it. One of the reasons we associated with Kent, with his advice, we've people like Ken have helped bring this technology to life.
And I guess one of the earlier questions somebody had on there is, how is Zetaris different from some of the existing virtualization platforms? What he just said. That's that's the answer. And I'll be honest, when Paul, who works for Vinay, is a buddy of mine from Snowflake. He was a Snowflake partner in Australia, and he came to me when Vinay first came to him and said, hey Paul, would you be interested in joining our company? And Paul and I are good friends. And he called me and said, so what do you think about this opportunity, Kent? And I had him he described to me what Vinay was doing, what Zetaris is doing. And it looked like a really good opportunity for Paul based on where he was in his career and what he wanted to do. So I said, yeah, this looks like a good company to join. And then a couple months after that, then Paul, after I retired, started coming with Vinay and saying, hey, we want you to come advise us. And I honestly was a little skeptical because I've worked with some of the older technologies and virtualization. And it goes back to early days. We used to call it EII, Enterprise Information Integration. And all of those technologies over time proved that they were useful for achieving some of the things that Vinay is talking about, but they failed at scale. So they were pretty good for prototyping. But to solve this, this last problem about, the query performance, that's what Zetaris has done. And, similar to, and what I saw here was, visions of Snowflake, right? Snowflake reinvented the data platform for the cloud, taking advantage of cloud. Vinay and his team reinvented the query engine, applying, new modern thinking in the mathematics of query optimization and taking advantage of the new engines that are out there in order to power it. And that's the difference, right? And that's the key, really the key, one of the key differentiators for Zetaris from all the technologies that have come before is, I'll steal a thing from Snowflake. It actually works. Right.
Absolutely.
Ken, so you mentioned that Zetaris has reinvented query engines, and I've heard of Zetaris being referred to as the engine of engines. Vinay, can you talk a little bit about what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's a concept that actually when we run a query, we not only optimize the query within our system, we actually re-optimize the query for each connected source. So in a sense, our query engine is an engine that runs the other source engines better, faster, and cheaper. So for instance, what does that mean? We may be connected to a Teradata system, and Teradata's got a great query optimizer within it for what's called homogeneous query optimization, and so is Snowflake and Databricks and others. So what we do is we run an engine that actually optimizes the other engines, right, and controls the other engines. If you take that concept even further, where we're heading is this idea of a query director that directs all queries or all business and application queries that an organization has, directs it to the right source, the right engine for that workload requirement. And that's where this concept of engines comes from. This idea that you have a master query director that makes a decision. This is a business question, this is an application workload, or it could be an analytical workload. What's the right engine to send it to and optimize that engine? That's the whole concept behind it.
All right. Thank you for that explanation. We'll take maybe one or two more questions from the audience. I know we're at time, we're over time. Vinay is overtired. He's actually stayed up, so it's now almost 4 a.m.
I can't wait to be back in Palo Alto. So I'm back mid-Jan, and then we'll all be in the same time zone. And by the way, we've got 30 people on the ground in America, so they'll all be waiting for me, and there'll be a big party in Jan in Palo Alto when I get back, by the way.
Amazing. I love to hear that. Okay, so the next question we have here is, does Zetaris have a version of the view virtualization so upstream applications don't break and get time to get upgraded and change?
Yes, absolutely. So it's the idea of having a view, the idea that upstream application, we do what's called metadata surveillance. So we're always surveilling the upstream application performance, the impact that our system is having on the sources. The whole idea of our query optimizer technology is to minimize the impact on those source systems, right? Mm-hmm. Or if we can't minimize the impact, we come up with another strategy. It could be streaming or replication services or whatever we'd implement to come up with that hybrid view of the data. So yeah, the answer is yes. It's a big part of the problem we've solved. And going back to what Ken said, what we've built, and we, I genuinely feel we've kind of cracked the code on an analytical data virtualization, where the existing players prior to us were, they cracked the code on what I would call operational data virtualization. So you'd almost think of us as the Snowflake for virtualization or the Teradata for virtualization because of the focus on analytical workloads. And therefore, if you're going to do that well, you've got to be able to manage the source and the upstream application performance as well as your own.
Got it. And, given that we're coming up to the close of the year of 2022, I think we should all take out our virtual crystal ball and maybe talk a little bit about predictions for what you're seeing in the next year or two. I know you both have mentioned a little bit about what you're expecting to see, but maybe let's do a quick recap of the trends and predictions that you have for this space in the next couple of years.
I'll let you go first, Ken, and I might feed off you.
Okay. Well, there's a lot. So the top of mind is data products. Everybody is starting to talk about data products, coming out of the data mesh world, but it's not exclusively to data mesh, but actually finally thinking of data as an asset that can be shared or monetized like a physical product. So I think we're going to see even more adoption of that and people trying to build data products faster, which of course means everything we've been talking about, having high quality, high trust, high visibility to all of that. Hybrid platforms, I said it's been evidenced with some of the announcements from Snowflake, what they're doing with reaching out to data outside of the Snowflake platform. And obviously here with what Zetaris is doing, that we've got this kind of hybrid architecture is, I'll say, coming back. It never went away. It never really went away. What I hope we're going to see is more harmonization, rather than having quote unquote hybrid, which just means you got a whole bunch of data silos and, people they've got a common plane to access it, but, you don't want to use Zetaris and have 3 different customer data marts visualized in the semantic layer. So you have like customer 1, customer 2, and customer 3 for some silly reason. That we're going to see this hybrid, but more of a harmonized hybrid, and thinking about it holistically from the top levels. And then with that means a growth in data literacy and building of data cultures across more and more organizations so that they can become data driven. I think that's going to continue with the assistant of machine learning and AI. We're going to see more and more of that. It's becoming, I'll say, more prevalent. It's not just the biggest biotech companies that are doing AI anymore, right? It's all over the place. We need it for supply chain, obviously.
Yes. And Vinay, I'd love to hear your thoughts and maybe add in a couple of bullets on there for Zetaris' roadmap, right, for the future.
Yeah. So yeah, and absolutely. So we're placing bets on some trends that we've picked up on from our customers, but also advice from various advisors, Kent, and some of the big advisory firms like Gartner and Forrester. So right in line with what Kent's saying, we've brought to market and bringing in an extension to this idea of a data mesh collaboration environment on top of our existing analytical data virtualization application. So we really see that data mesh, data product development, businesses wanting to organize around data domains and data products and be able to reap the benefits of that kind of model. So we've built software to enable that, to make it easier to do. So I see that playing out next year. The other big bet we're placing is on this idea of, we've heard about the citizen data scientist, the idea of the citizen data engineer. And what that means is it's the business person who wants to self-serve. They want access to the data layer. They want to get their hands dirty in terms of mashing up data in different places. But to do that, you've got to do it in a governed way where the IT folks and the data engineering teams are playing facilitator and governors over the business who know the data, they know the business, and they want to be the citizen data engineer. So we've put a lot of thinking and built capability around enabling business people to roll their own data layer. And in line with that, the final thing I'll mention, which we've brought to market, is this idea of policy-based governance, where you're not just creating restrictions and limitation on data access and rules around which role has the right full access to what data and what can they not do with it. You're actually implementing real-time AI engines that assist the business person and governs from a policy perspective the query. Okay, and so within our system, we've got the ability to stop a bad query. So if there's a query that's going to breach a policy or a business rule, we're going to stop it. Okay, and I'll give you a memorable one that we picked up from one of our banking customers, and it was basically they realized that one of their data scientists had picked up a correlation between gender and someone's ability or willingness to pay their bills on time. Right? That's a great correlation. However, that can lose your banking license, right?
Wow.
And you don't want to run that query. You want to stop that query, or you want to report it. So with policy-based governance, real-time AI-assisted governance, I think you're going to see more and more, enabling people to do the things they want to do, and letting them take the risks that are close to the edge, but never going over the edge. Always, using the technology to stop it. So I think that's where, right across every industry, AI is going to be augmenting, assisting, creating guardrails rather than doing the work. That's what I see over the next year or two for AI in the data space.
Yeah, thank you so much both for sharing this. We always talk about data democratization and how we need data in everyone's hands and all the data, but there are very important queries that shall not be run. So I love that you have the technology to prevent that before it even happens and ends up, at the cover of a newspaper.
That's right.
And then everyone's in trouble. So I want to thank you both so much for taking the time today. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the audience has gotten a lot out of this conversation. We still have so many questions we unfortunately could not get to. But the last question I'd like to ask the speakers is, where can people go to continue the conversation? Where can they go to learn more? I think, Vinay, you mentioned you're coming back in January. There might be some events that they can attend. So I'd love to hear from both of you.
Yeah, so please go to Zetaris.com. We've got the trial page there, the demo page, our marketing calendar for next year's, I think it's published or being published. We'll be doing more and more of these type of webinars and marketing. Do take it for a test drive. We do have, as I said, free certification for people who are interested. If you're a data engineer, this is going to make your life easier. If you're a business person, you can get access to the data much quicker and do it yourself with a data engineer facilitating you rather than being in the way. So it's something for both the business and the engineering folks, and the training is geared for both. So yeah, Zetaris.com is your point of call. Perfect.
And for you, Kent?
Best thing probably is to follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you if you're not connected with me, send a note and say, saw you on the dedicated one. So I know how you found me this time.
Yes.
I do repost a lot of things from Zetaris, along with some of the other companies that I advise. And so I'm probably most active there, but being semi-retired, it's not like it used to be last year. I do have a blog, kentgraziano.com, and I do periodically post things on there, especially if I'm doing events like this. I try to get a blog post up and out to my followers that way. And I am on Twitter doing pretty much the same thing. Like I said, just not as frequently as, those of you who've been following me for years, not nearly what I was doing a year or two ago. It's a lot less frequent because I am actually trying to be semi-retired at my wife's request.
Well, we're going to have to stay, I'm going to have to follow you more and see if you're actually semi-retired, because I do see a lot of your content, Ken, so I don't know how much I believe that retired part.
Well, the advantage, of course, is, the phone.
Yes, I know.
Right?
You're always on.
Yeah, so it's pretty easy for me to keep up. It's a lot easier for me to keep up on interesting things, and it's a push of a button to repost it. And so if I find stuff interesting, then I tend to repost. Just to keep people informed. It'll at various times you'll see me, I'll just kind of disappear, and that means I'm like off at the beach or visiting my family or doing something else. So it's generally not as constant as it once was.
Awesome. Well, Kent, Vinay, thank you so much for being here today on the Dedicated Show. I hope you enjoy both your travels, your staying home, and everyone else, happy holidays. I'll see you online. No more live shows, but I'll definitely see everybody online. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.